Hey, I'm Nick, and in this video I talk with Justin Dean. Justin used to be the communications director and PR director at Mars Hill Church. He wrote the book PR Matters, and he created That Church Conference, a conference all about church marketing and communications. And so we talk about church PR, public relations, something most churches don't think about until something goes wrong, right? And so we talk about that. And he thinks churches should think about that in advance, not just when something goes wrong and it's crisis management. So I ask him about that. We talk about That Church Conference, the different things that are taught there and that you can learn there as a church leader, how it's grown over the years. We talk about church marketing in general. How should our churches approach marketing? Who is our audience? How can we speak to them in the right way with the right words? And so you'll get all of that in this interview. This interview is bonus content for the New Digital Church course. That course is all about helping your church reach and connect people online. So if you're interested in that, check out newdigitalchurch.com. Go ahead and subscribe if you want to see the other interviews in this series. And if this is helpful to you, give that like button a hit. Hey, Nick Blevins here, and I'm here with Justin Dean. Welcome, Justin.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, you bet. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and I feel like you're involved in lots of projects and things and what you do to help serve churches.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know, it's been, over 10 years ago, started as communications director up at Mars Hill Church in Seattle. That's what got me into ministry. Before that, I was in marketing and communications, a number of different like tech startups and things. But the Lord led us into ministry. We took a job at Mars Hill, and obviously that church is no more. Ended at the end of 2014. So I was one of the last 4 or 5 employees there till the very bitter end. But I was the spokesperson for the church. I was in charge of PR and marketing, communications, and social media. We had a great big team there that helped with all of that. And then when that closed down, I started a conference called That Church Conference, moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm at now. And I've been running that for the last, it's going on 6 years now. And with that, we formed a company called the Sunday Group that operates the conference. And then we've got a number of membership sites that serve churches. We're all about just kind of helping churches not only put together a really awesome Sunday experience, but really how to engage with the world from Sunday to Sunday. And so we teach and provide a lot of resources on how to do social media well, how to have a great website, email marketing strategy, things like that, because we think there's a huge opportunity for the church to be engaged with people throughout the week as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping people will get from watching this video and other ones like it is how to leverage online better. But I do want to talk about kind of like your Mars Hill experience. You get to learn a little bit in the fire, just a little bit,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And you wrote a book, PR Matters. And I think a lot of churches, it doesn't matter until something really goes wrong. And then it really matters, right? When there's a crisis
Yeah.
of some kind of public relations nature. But for a lot of people watching this, maybe they've been through one of those, maybe they're in that, but most people probably aren't, but it still matters. So I'd love for you to talk about the book and give us some tips as like what we should think about as churches before something like that ever even happens.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. I named it PR Matters because you don't really think that it matters. It's the last thing, particularly a church is thinking about, particularly if your church is, pretty much squeaky clean. Your pastor's great. He's not sleeping around. He's not saying crazy things on social media. Why would we ever have a problem? We're a church. We're good Christians. And it's that kind of thinking that really, in very simple terms, led to the closure of Mars Hill Church. And we've seen countless other, big churches and small churches that have gone through accusations. They've gone through scandals. They've gone through, big and small types of issues. And even the big churches still are just not prepared to handle that kind of just intensity that happens if something goes wrong. And so the whole idea behind the book and just kind of what I teach churches now is you need to be prepared ahead of time. There's so much that we can do ahead of time. And so, I walk through creating a full crisis communications plan before anything ever hits. It's something you may never need, but just like insurance or anything else, it's something that you're going to be so thankful that you have if something does happen.
Yeah, and as you were talking about that, I was thinking of something that I hadn't thought of right now till right now. There's a church near me that we're connected to. We're good friends with them. Very large church, one of the larger churches in our area, and they had just a simple thing where they're trying to figure out like waste treatment. They're playing. Their church is so big. They're on a well. Like it's all that kind of water issue stuff. And without them even realizing it, one of the solutions they were exploring became a controversy because it involved a freshwater stream river thing,
Wow.
and I know them personally. They were not looking to do anything wrong. They wanted to do everything above board, the whole deal. But before you know it, there's an article, and then there's 4 articles, and then of course people assume the worst, like, oh,
Yeah.
they're just big mega church. They don't care about the environment. And so, like, actually, that was an example where I thought that on the crisis scale, it isn't huge,
Right.
but it mattered, and they needed some of the things you talked about there, right?
Yeah. Well, listen, so, the mission of your church needs to go on. It will go on in general terms, but things like that can be so distracting from trying to do even just a Sunday message each week, let alone engage with the community or be a part of the community, particularly when a good portion of the community and the media is out there writing articles, about you. Something like that. It's not something you would ever anticipate could happen, but there's a lot of stuff that you can prepare for that'll help you tackle that a little bit better. I mean, things like you can choose, who is your spokesperson ahead of time. So when that local paper calls or a TV station shows up or whatever, okay, Jim, the communications director, is who talks to these people. And so anybody, your volunteers on Sunday morning, your key leaders, your worship pastor who's just anxious to get on the camera, they all know, like, no, this is Jim's job. And so when they're approached, they can say, hey, we would love to talk with you more. Jim, our communications director, would be happy to talk to you. Here's his information. That way, everything's funneled through one spot. There's only one communication going out. It can be planned. It can be articulated well. A lot of what I help churches now walk through, because, they'll contact me and say, hey, you've been through something similar. How do we prepare for this? Or they're in the middle of something and they want to be prepared in case it happens again or whatever. And a big part of that is saying, okay, what are our stances on certain issues that are going to come up? Particularly in all of these interviews, especially that church that you mentioned, okay, they're dealing with a water issue. It's kind of an environmental type of issue. But in those articles, it's usually going to be a line or two about the church is, no stranger to controversy, as they also believe that, gay marriage is not, something that should happen or whatever. There's usually that one or two line that they can pick apart to make it seem like this is a bigger problem. This is a mega church that just hates the world and hates gay people, and now they hate the environment. And it's like, well, wait a minute. And so having a written stance on those types of issues that may come up, and it doesn't matter which side you're on when it comes to those issues. The whole point is to have it written down so that you can back up your stance on that and articulate it well when it comes up, because that's, you get a volunteer or somebody who's just scared or makes a little misstep or something, and it can really snowball something like that into a bigger issue. And a lot of this is just trying to manage that perception, like not to, put anything under the rug or whatever, sweep anything under the rug, not to manipulate stuff, but to really align with their perception with the reality of what you actually believe and what you actually want to communicate. So you do all that ahead of time, and you're going to save yourself a lot of panic and a lot of headache if something does happen.
Yeah, I think about, I know of a church where over the years, maybe the past 10, 15 years, they had a couple moral failures with staff, not with the lead pastor, but with other staff.
Yeah.
And they were probably like 4 or 5 years apart. and they were handled so differently. I mean, the one was like, we're not telling you anything.
Right.
And I think they learned from that that wasn't great, right? Because people
Yeah.
make up their own stories.
Yeah.
And then the other one was like, I felt like you talk too much. You know what I mean? Like it's probably somewhere in the middle. And like, what should
Yeah.
churches know about how much to share? Because like you said, you
Yeah.
don't be manipulative or hide things. But
Right.
where's that medium, near that middle?
Yeah, I think one of the worst things you can do is just not share anything. I mean, if you look through the history books of Mars Hill, that was basically our stance from leadership down. With a lot of that stuff was, we're just going to keep trucking along with our mission. Don't say anything. Don't reply. There was a good portion where we just kind of shut down and we stopped saying things, and that ultimately, like you said, I mean, people just made up their own stories. The articles were still being written. The TV shows were still being made. Like it just, it became so out of control that when we did finally come back and say, okay, well, now we'll talk, the narrative had already been written for us. And then it just became, we were in such a defensive position. And so you don't want to be in that position. You don't want to be in a defensive position. You want to get ahead of it, like you've always heard, get ahead of the story. And so I believe, the best thing you can do in any situation like that, big or small, is to be as open, and I say candid, as much as you can. Like we had people demanding, how much does, Mark Driscoll make? What's his salary? We demand to know. Even the congregation was like, we demand to know. And, I had to get out there and say, well, look, that's not something that we divulge. Like, you're not going to know my salary. You're not going to know Mark's salary. We don't, share the personal, finances of our people. But here's why: because of safety issues, because of privacy issues, because legally we can't in a lot of in a lot of cases. And so you just explaining to them, being candid to them, like, hey, here's what I can tell you, here's what I can't tell you, and here's why. And as often as you can, be transparent. If you can share it, share it. I feel like if you've really got nothing to hide, then share it. But you want to be, you just want to be personable with people, communicate with them, build relationships with them, whether it's media or the public or your congregation. You want to always be building those relationships, building that trust. And when you make mistakes, being candid about that as well. And I think that goes a long way. You obviously don't want to create bigger problems. So there is a ceiling on, okay, we don't want to just continually share these things that might, be negative towards us. But as things come up, or as you discover a mistake or something like that, I think it's important to have those conversations with the appropriate people. There's probably circles, okay, your members, your congregation, the public, media. It gets bigger and bigger, and you've got to determine, okay, what is this situation something that we just get out there and share to the media? We hold our own press conference, we put out our own press release. That could be, in certain situations that might be appropriate. More often than not, it's usually, okay, let's tell our members at least, and make sure that they're on the same page, and that we can, just put everything on the table. Sometimes it might mean, okay, we've got to make a Sunday announcement, or we've got to send out a mass email to the whole church to let them know about this. You've got to just kind of use your own discernment and determine the appropriateness of how you communicate that. But I think you communicate well and clearly. You communicate often, and you kind of go from there. But the last thing you want to do is hide and not say anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, how about churches? Obviously, all churches should read PR Matters and kind of create the plan, even if they're not in a crisis mode. But the other thing I think about is like general PR for churches,
Yeah.
general brand. I don't think a lot of churches think intentionally about that. It's just, it is what it is.
Right.
There's no focused effort on that. Like, what would you say about that?
Yeah. So that's the big key. So it's not just creating a plan and putting it on the shelf and saying, okay, crisis happened, let's put out the plan and put it in place. That's one part of it, and that's certainly helpful. But what's going to really help you during those situations is if you've built up kind of that relational equity before then. You've been active on social media, and engaging with your people through social media, engaging with the public through social media. you're building up that good perception of the church that really aligns with who you really are and what you really believe. You're getting ahead of controversial issues and things like that, if needed, by putting out content and stuff that explains your position more in a loving way, things like that. The churches that don't have issues like that are the churches that are very clear about what they believe. It's like, no, we're not going to be neutral on stuff. We believe this, this, and this, and here's why. And they produce content and posts and things that explain that well. So that way it's no surprise to anyone if something like that comes out. So many churches are just hiding their stance on certain things, just praying that it never really becomes an issue or no one ever pushes back on it. And it's like, no, if you really truly believe whatever that is, back it up and be bold about it, and you're going to be fine, particularly if it's a solid biblical perspective on something. Abortion can be one. It's okay for your church to take a bold, clear statement against abortion and to even put out content that's helpful for people and done so in a loving way. You're not going to get a ton of pushback. Obviously, half the world is going to disagree with you, but it's going to be no surprise when that comes up in a crisis or something like that. And then, engaging with the media and stuff like that too. If you have a person on your team who can be in charge of this, whether it's a communications person or whether it's something, your assistant or the receptionist or the worship pastor kind of does, in addition to their regular duties, it doesn't really matter, but hopefully there's someone who can kind of tackle this type of stuff. But they should be engaging with the media before a negative story hits. Build those relationships with them, determine who are the key media players at the blog level, at the local newspaper level, at the big daily newspaper, the local TV stations. Build rapport with them. When they share a good article, tweet, reply to them and say, hey, I'm from Hope Fellowship, and we just love this article. I love this point that you made in it, or whatever. And people who put out work like that, they want to be praised. They want to, most of them will engage back with you. And you know what? Next time they're doing an article, a positive article on something, like say a food bank, needed help, they're going to reach out to you and say, hey, would you mind providing a quote, for us on this? And you can build up some positive PR for your church, or they'll even let you know about opportunities where you can get in there. All they want is a story. All they want is clicks on their article. And so, the more that you can help them by providing quotes and providing content for them, you're doing their job for them. Most of them have to do 2 or 3 articles a day. And so they don't have time to go out and do interviews like they used to. You can provide them that type of content, and they'll run with it, because it's really hard to get positive stories out for your church, but you can get a quote or two here or there. And if you've built up that relationship, then you can approach them and say, hey, I know I've provided you a few quotes and you've written a few articles on this. We're actually launching a new campus or something, or whatever you want to promote. And here's some information on that. Provide, write it as if it's an article that can be just copy and pasted, because that's mostly what they do. And you'll have a greater chance of getting some positive PR out there as well. And then, social media is just the big part of it. The more active you are on social media, actually engaging with people, inviting them in the Facebook groups, posting more than just see you this Sunday, or here's the worship set list, or everything's geared towards, come to our church on Sunday, or here's our next event. Like that stuff's important to communicate, but that's really, to me, it's 1% of what you should be doing on social media. Some would say 10 or 20%, but I think there's a huge opportunity to really engage with people, get to know them on a personal level throughout the week on social media as well. You've got email marketing, you got content you can put on your website, you can start a blog. All of this stuff helps create a perception of your church and the things that you believe in and the messages that you want to put out that are going to help you when something does happen. If something does happen, like, say you post something a little controversial and you get a lot of Facebook negative comments, you're going to see people actually jump on and reply to those comments for you before you even can get ahead of it. People will reply and say, no, I know this church, they don't actually believe that, or here's what they believe, or here's an article they posted on this last week. that explains more, you'll see people come to your defense a little bit if you've already kind of built up that rapport on social media. And that's what's really great. I mean, that's the crutch of PR, is what other people say about you. You can say all you want. You can put out marketing. You can even do paid ads and saying, no, we're great. Look at this. Here's what we believe. But when other people come to your defense and start saying good things about you, when other people start posting about your church, inviting other people to it, that's where PR really starts to work and the gears all start to work together. But you've got to have that cohesive big plan that all works together to make it get to that point.
What would you say are some examples? Like when you say 1%, you should be those things. Let's face it, that's like 80 or 90% of a lot of churches' social media is the 1% you're talking
Yeah.
about. So like practically in the weeds, what do you think churches should do? You even mentioned blog posts and articles. Again, I do think that is more where churches can lean into like content marketing. But what are some examples of how churches could use social media well?
I think it does start with content marketing. So take, at the very basic level, take your sermon and chop it up into 3 or 4 clips. If there's a single point that could be made, chop that into a clip, throw it on social media, put it on YouTube, put it out on TikTok, put it out on Facebook, and then do so in a way that sparks engagement. Ask questions. And then when people actually comment, reply back. A lot of it is going to be something that just needs to be built up over time. The more consistent you are with it and the greater quality you have of the content you put out, people are going to start engaging. And you can start it out by spending, a few bucks here and there to do some Facebook ads and ads on other platforms to get that content out there to a wider audience, kind of kick in those algorithms to start showing your content. But you start there, blog posts are great. You can write blog posts on any kind of issue that's related to your sermon or just in general. Like YouTube, if you look at the top things that people search for on YouTube, it's usually questions like how to do this. And there's a ton of, faith-based questions and content on YouTube where churches and pastors are just not found. People are literally searching for, how to read the Bible, or should I abort my baby, or who really was Jesus, things like that. And you can get on there with your phone and create a 5-minute video answering each one of those questions, or you can work it into your sermon and then post a clip of the sermon, or you can create a produced video for that stuff. And then put it out there with that title on there, and you're going to get people exposed to that content and then exposed to your church, and it'll grow from there. Some churches struggle with the fact that, okay, once you get more active on social media, then your audience grows beyond your local neighborhood. And so you've got to have a strategy around that. Some churches are okay with that. They want to reach the nations through social media. To me, I would say put your entire missions budget into social media and watch how you can literally reach just about every nation in a very real, practical way. I mean, we talk with people in Uganda who we're in Facebook groups with, and who we actually talk to them through WhatsApp, because everyone over there has a phone with WhatsApp on it. And we're able to stay in community with people who are in Africa, who, I flew there and visited them, and that's how we got to know them. But now I have a ongoing relationship. I'm in community with them throughout the week. And I think churches can facilitate that kind of thing through Facebook groups and through, tools like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger and all that. You want to put out your content and then kind of funnel people through into, okay, now we're reaching a wide audience. Now we want to funnel them down into some kind of community, into group where we can get to know them better and actually ask them questions and build relationships with them. And then from there, it's okay, watch our live stream or come to our church or join a physical community group wherever you are, whatever your plan is, but to have that strategy in place and to funnel them down into, just like you would on Sunday morning. Someone comes for the first time. Okay, they're a first-time visitor. Here's our first-time visitor follow-up plan. Okay, now they've come a couple times. Okay, now we want to invite them into a community group. Okay, now we want to invite them into membership. Okay, now we want them to serve on Sunday and become a tither, a regular tither. Okay, now we want them to be, a leader. Okay, now we want them to become a deacon. every church pretty much has those plans in place. Just apply that to social media in a digital way and have that in mind with every interaction, with every piece of content that you put out, and you'll see it works just as well. But a lot of this just comes down to thinking through that stuff and having that plan in place.
Yeah. Well, talk a little bit about that church conference so people can see that cc.com for the next one. And,
Yeah.
and I'm also curious, one, tell people about what it is and like how it works and everything they can learn. But it's grown so much, the amount of content. And I even wonder about like the topics. Like what are some of the things that are kind of more relevant and talked about now at the conference
Yeah.
that maybe weren't so 5 years ago? But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, since when we started the conference a little over 5 years ago, we had 150 people attend from all over the U.S. We had people come from different countries too, even to that first one. And nobody in the room was like a full-time communications person at their church. Like it was just such a new concept even at that point. My role at Mars Hill was one of 5 or 6 of big mega churches that actually existed, and just nobody even knew what to call them. So most of the people attending were volunteers, or they kind of did it part-time or something like that, or they were just so new to the concept of why do we need a communications person. And that's changed year after year. I mean, kind of every year we do a thing where we say, raise your hand if you're full-time in this role. And every year more people raise their hands. And so this last year it was majority of people are at least in some kind of paid position in communications or marketing, and that's growing over year after year. Now that we've gone through this season of COVID and church online, and every single church was forced to go online in some way or another, and even do digital giving when they said they never would, and live streaming when they said they never would, and having to get on social media even to just survive the last 6-7 months that we've gone through. Now that they've seen that and they've had to rely so much on their communications and production teams, they've realized, okay, this is a viable, important part of our church. And even as we see churches reopening again and going back to their Sunday morning experiences, hopefully we see a lot of churches still see the value in what they did online. And so now they're kind of doing both when they never were before. And those communications people are now, they have a seat at the table with senior leadership, and they can actually speak into the strategy of things to say, yeah, we need to do Sunday morning really, really well, but we also need to do online and have a digital plan there as well. And so that's kind of the focus of the conference, kind of always has been, but that's definitely the majority of the focus of what we do at that church conference. We're a communications and marketing conference. So we bring in leaders to teach practical steps on how to implement all of this. So all of our speakers either work for a church or work with churches to develop these kind of plans. They're people who are in the trenches, practitioners, just like you, that are willing to help, teach what they've been through. A lot of what we walk through is case studies, actual real examples of here's what we did at churches, small and churches really big. And it's been great leading the conference. We're going on 6 years now. We've, this next one we've got coming up is all digital. It's all online. We've always had a really great live stream, and we always put our content online. But this year, of course, it's the whole thing is online. And then we'll continue to meet again each year in Atlanta here for the big events. It's nice just being able to network with each other and see other people in the same room that kind of do what you do and understand what you do. There's just something about that. So we'll always continue the physical conferences as well. But I'm excited this year because we've got over 80 speakers. Now that we've got it online, we kind of just said, let's just put out as much content as we can, let people consume it throughout the year. So, every ticket holder gets access to watch the videos on demand and walk through them with their teams kind of as needed. We don't expect everyone to watch all 80 videos. It's kind of a choose your own adventure. Okay, if you're the social media manager, you might find these 20 videos relevant. If you're a production guy, you might find these relevant. And so we're covering every single topic of how to do church, and you can choose, even senior leaders can choose like a leadership track. So really excited about that, and hope people can join us at thatcc.com.
Is there, I got to put you on the spot here because I'm wondering now that, you're 6 years in, and especially with expanded to 80 speakers, whether it
Yeah.
was last year or this year, is there like some unique topics that people would hear that and think, gosh, I never thought about that, or I wonder if my church should explore that? Because I think that's part of what that CC can do is it open churches to new opportunities and even ideas and methods that they hadn't thought about before. Does any of those come to mind?
We cover pretty much every single thing, and so if you're wanting to learn how to engage people better on social media, we've got content directly on that. If you're wanting to learn how to work through a crisis, we've got content on that. We've got just about everything. So it's literally, if you're having trouble, like we have sessions on how to launch a book. So particularly for smaller churches or churches that are growing, and their pastors like, hey, I want to put out a book, and the teams go, we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to publish a book. We don't know how to get a publisher. We don't know how to do it ourselves. We don't know how to market this. And so we've got sessions, and we've even got marketing plans that you can download that walk you through, okay, here's the first time how to publish and market a book. And one of the things it walks through too is the fact that anybody can do this. You are producing 30 to 45 minutes worth of content every week that's based around books of the Bible and different topics through your sermons. And most pastors have that content written out or their notes written out. And so we have sessions walking you through even how to take your sermon content and produce that into a book, or how to produce that into blog posts throughout the week, or social media content throughout the week, and stuff like that. And so, basically anything you can think of that you're struggling with, we've got a session for that over the last 5 years worth of content in our vault, which is pretty amazing. I think we've got over 600 videos altogether with all the different webinars and things that we've done over the years, teaching on all this kind of stuff.
That's cool. And how can people connect with you? Obviously, thatcc.com. You mentioned You also have some membership sites that help churches do some of these kinds of things. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, you can go to Sunday2Sunday.com. So Sunday.com, and that will direct you to pretty much everything we do. We've got a couple membership sites that people can sign up for and get practical resources, downloads, social media images, things like that. So that's all linked on Sunday2Sunday.com. We've got a podcast. You can become a Sunday Insider, which is free. We literally just send you free downloadable resources every month to kind of tease out all of our products, but it's full free stuff that you can get. We have about 16, I think actually 18,000 people subscribed to that now. They get that each month, and a lot of those go on to come to our conference, or they subscribe to our membership sites to get more, but we try to put as much free stuff in there as possible to just kind of serve the church and help out as much as we can.
Cool. Well, thanks, Justin, for taking the time to talk and for what you do to serve churches.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure, and hope it was helpful.